Hello, I'm Steve Ince and I'm going to be demonstrating some of the brushes that I use in Photoshop. First of all, there's a pencil brush that I quite like to use, which I developed myself based on ideas from other people's brushes. But I usually choose a sort of like warm grey colour, and then if you draw, you can sort of do it at different pressures to get, and obviously you can increase the size of it if you not want to, or go very fine if you feel you need to as well. And obviously the size of it depends on the resolution that I want to work, so you can kind of create a nice pencil type effect when you're shading. And obviously pencil brushes can vary quite a bit. I might want to, but when I do the inking, I have quite a number of different ones. This one is actually one I got from can't remember where it was one of Group Brushes, or possibly one of the ones from Carl Webster, maybe. I must remember, and I've tweaked it a little bit for my own purposes. But if you see, it's got a very scruffy kind of look to it. This is one I'm using for Amanda Alexander, but it varies nicely. But I don't usually use it at this size. I usually sort of, for Amanda Alexander, I knock it down to about 20-25. So that's 25 size. Sort of. And you get really nice fine lines if you, but they're still all, a bit scruffy, which is kind of works well with Amanda, particularly on hair which has that kind of, sort of curliness to it, which I think is great when handled with this brush. Just gives it a nice, bit of character. So when I'm doing that, sort of I'm thinking, so, sort of, but even, like with her eyebrows, I'm sort of like doing it like that, sort of, and then, sort of she has, sort of, one thing I've found is that with female characters, if you give them a little bit of a, sort of eyelashes like that, then they look more female. And she has this kind of like slightly square nose, and a sort of very squarish sort of face. Only you don't see her here because of her hair. so her hair kind of comes, like this. And this is obviously very quick, so I'm sort of, usually I'd kind of have a rough pencil drawing and then do this inking over the top. And one of the brushes I like to use for colouring is to give a kind of bit of a watercolory effect, is, when I can find it, is this brush that I got from Carl Webster, which is a splashy sort of brush, which looks like that if you're, so it's kind of like a complex brush because it's a dual brush. I think I'll reduce that in size a bit so you can see it better. Sort of, and this is kind of how it is at a basic level. Now if but I've modified this from Carl's original brush, so that if you set up a couple of colours, you might set up a red, and green, say. And then what you can do is you can create, because I've adjusted it so it uses both colours, you can see the sort of like, although I've got green chosen at the moment, the red is kind of picking through, which gives a nice effect. But then if you swap colours to the red, you can see that it varies a bit with the reds and the pinks, and there's a hint of the green coming through as well, which is nice. But you can be more subtle with it, so you could have this like, sort of this red, and maybe you might choose an orangey sort of yellow. So, sort of like the yellows here, the red coming through a little. And if I switch again, you've got the red, which is varying quite a bit and becoming, a bit pink in places, but the yellow is coming through, and you get this lovely effect. And if I press lightly, the effect is a bit more subtle, you see, a bit more watercolour-like. Do you see? Which gives me lovely effects. I mean, this one actually is, sort of a splashy one, but with foliage texture with the splashiness. So it creates that kind of fascinating extra dimension to the textures. You can explore that. I mean, you can get the effect to be more contrasted or wider. I mean, if I chose a much darker green, then suddenly sort of you've got more variety in there. And it becomes a thing in itself almost. So I've got sort of like a number of brushes like that, and then there's kind of like different kind of brushes that if I give, which is nice if you're doing black and white work, if you want to fill in areas with a bit of a random texture, you can kind of develop this. But sometimes you might want to work into that. So if I go to the eraser tool and choose the same brush, then you can sort of work into it and get nice effects like that, you see. Which, sort of like if you've got it within a particular shape or something, or you're trying to create a moody background for your superhero character or something like this, you might sort of work that up. And then obviously sort of like you can develop all kinds of different hatching techniques, so you might want something like that, and that's obviously got a bit of colour going in there. But again, you can sort of like work back into it with the eraser. So you can create all sorts of effects that way. And then, if you want straight inking, I've developed this inking brush, which is just vanished. I've got the wrong one there. Dear. There we go. That was on the eraser. So it goes basically like that. And that's quite a heavy one, sort of. That's at 10. I'd probably sort of like set it down to about 6, and then it's kind of, you can sort of like work it in like this. I mean, you might want to do an eye, so you sort of you sort of doing little things like this. So yeah, and then there's lots of other things that go on around eyes. I hope you can see that if you can't. Right, I think that's enough for now. Thank you.